In the year 1999, a phenomenal event occurred in the skies which altered the course of human history.
It's always either be eaten out in the battlefield, no matter who or what you're up against.
I have only spared you from total dissolution.
The aliens have taken hostages and are controlling their bodies. Listen, Ulala, we're taking off by Astrobeat spaceship right now.
Roger.
Oh yeah, this could be fun.
Look at you, hacker. A pathetic creature of meat and bones.
I can foretell many things in the future. So, let's see your future.
The role-playing game genre almost requires a fully fleshed out story to set itself apart from other genres. While the RPG genre at the time was dominated by Dragon Quest in the East and Final Fantasy in the West, Sega and GameArts were introducing an RPG series that set itself apart with animated cutscenes similar to what set Japanese animation apart from Western animation. Stories in video games had normally been told through on-screen text, fully cinematic cutscenes, or with no words whatsoever. Since the late 80s, some of the stories from the games released in Japan have relied on animation. Animation in Japan achieved fame for storytelling elements not commonly seen in the West, where Japanese animation became known as anime. Anime-inspired cutscenes found their way in video games in the late 80s, but the concept didn't become popularized and fleshed out until the release of Ys 1 and 2 for the TurboGrafx CD in 1989, but it was GameArts that would set the standard for combining traditional JRPG gaming with the kind of cinematic storytelling only possible in anime. It all began with GameArts and their founders Takeshi and Yoichi Miyagi. The prehistory of GameArts is highlighted in the Grandia episode of Silver Age, covering how diverse GameArts was in their catalog. 1992 would technically be the beginning of GameArts' connection to anime, with their release of Alicia Dragoon for the Sega Genesis. Alicia Dragoon would be a collaboration between GameArts and one of the biggest anime studios of its time, Gainax. It became successful enough for the game to resurface on the Sega Genesis Mini and Nintendo Switch's online service. GameArts' next game would be their take on a fantasy role-playing game that they felt would actually have proper storytelling, and one that would take full advantage of the recently released Sega CD, an add-on for the Genesis that would rival the power of the TurboGrafx CD. To achieve what GameArts wanted for Lunar the Silver Star, the studio recruited Kei Shigema, who had written Part 1 of the Silent Mobius anime film released in 1991. To take full advantage of the Sega CD, the game would feature fully animated cutscenes with voice acting. Leading the animation and character design efforts was Toshiyuki Kubuka. Kubuka's resume in anime goes as far back as the early 80s with his work on the Ideon. But arguably his most famous contribution to anime at this point in the 90s as both an animator and designer was his work on the Giant Robo OVA. The game was developed alongside a new studio, Studio Alex. Founded by former Nihon Falcom programmer Kazunori Tomi, Studio Alex was founded to help offset some of the actual development that went into the game. Main protagonist Alex would be named after this new subsidiary. Lunar the Silver Star would become the first major release for the Sega CD, helping increase the sales for the add-on. Sales would increase further when Working Designs would localize the game for North America in 1993. Working Designs was founded in 1986 by Todd Mark and Sylvia Schmidt. The company was originally meant to serve IBM PCs with accounting software and marketing. In 1988, after the passing of Todd Mark, Schmidt would hire the man to help lead Working Designs in Mark's place, the man who would change the course of Working Designs as a whole, as well as the import role-playing game market, Victor Island. Victor Ireland had a fascination with video games. His fascination led to a deal with Taito to localize games for the West. In 1991, the first games to be localized by Working Designs would be Parasol Stars and Kadash, both for the TurboGrafx CD. Fast forward to 1993, where Working Designs became a third-party publisher for the Sega CD after their success as a third-party publisher for the TurboGrafx CD. Lunar the Silver Star only took Working Designs 2 months to localize. The game became a critical and commercial hit in North America and Japan. In 1994 and 1995, Lunar Eternal Blue would be released in Japan and North America respectively, worked on by much of the same staff, but with a bigger budget this time around. The game also featured roughly 5 times the amount of fully voiced cinematics that the Silver Star did. It would also be a critical and commercial hit. After the release of Lunar Eternal Blue, there was interest in remaking Lunar the Silver Star. As successful as Silver Star was, it was not without its faults. Being released on aged hardware that limited what the developers could do, and with a script that had to be cut down to a third due to the limited time they had to develop the game. The remake's story would loosely follow the same plot of Silver Star, but with a more fleshed out script, with new characters introduced in Silver Star Story Complete to complement the fleshed out plot. This was done to make the story more in line with what was originally planned. The gameplay would also experience quality of life improvements, like removing random encounters and having all enemies appear on screen that would initiate a battle if you came in contact with them. The voice acting would also be greatly expanded. The original had 5 voice actors and 1 vocalist, 4 voice actors in Japan. Silver Star Story Complete featured 20 voice actors and 1 vocalist. In Japan, the entire cast of the Silver Star consisted of Kikuku Inoue as both Alex and Luna, Rei Sakuma as Null, Koichi Kitamura as Quark, Rokuro Naya as Galleon, and the vocal theme performed by Mayumi Sudo. The aforementioned roles and vocalist were all recast for the Japanese release of Silver Star Story Complete. Akira Ishida would be the new voice of Alex, Kyoko Hikami as Luna, Junko Hagamori as Null, Yusaku Yara as Quark, and Kiyoyuki Yanada as Galleon. Kyoko Hikami would also serve as the game's vocalist for the songs Tsubasa and Kaze no Nocturne. Joining this cast would be other notable anime seiyuu, including Akio Otsuka, Seiki Tomokazu, Haruna Ikizawa, and Sakura Tange. In North America, though, the actors that performed in The Silver Star came back for Silver Star Story Complete. Ashley Parker Angel would be the voice of Alex, Rhonda Gibson as Luna, Jackie Powers as Null, Hal Delahouse as Quark, and John Truitt as Galleon. The only casting change was the vocalist. Replacing Shia Almeida, who performed the localized opening theme for Silver Star, Fighting Through the Darkness, would be Jennifer Steigel. Steigel would become a vocalist for many titles published by Working Designs, having also sung for the games Popful Mail, Magic Knight Raiders, Silhouette Mirage, Vanguard Bandits, Ark the Lad Collection, and Growlancer 3 The Dual Darkness. Steigel also voices new antagonist Royce, joining the new lineup of voice actors that were cast for the game, many of which were local actors and or friends of the Working Designs staff. The score in Silver Star Story Complete would also receive an overhaul. The score for Silver Star would be composed by Noriyuki Iwadare, Isao Mizuguchi, Hiroshi Fujioka, and Yoshiaki Kubodera. Silver Star Story Complete would be completed solely by Iwadare, who composed nearly 100 new pieces for the game. Victor Ireland wanted to include remastered and rearranged pieces from the original score, all done in-house, and to possibly replace those with what was composed for Silver Star Story Complete. That could not be achieved due to what little space they had to work with in the game's files. The new score composed for Silver Star Story Complete would be Iwadare's way of adding a personal touch to his work. Outside of the Lunar games, Iwadare did arrangement work on Genesis ports of games like Zero Wing, Afterburner 2, and Ys 3 Wanderers of Ys. With his involvement in the Silver Star, he would start to get more attention for his work. The amount of cutscenes and the quality of the cutscenes would be improved as well, going from almost 10 minutes worth of cutscenes to nearly an hour's worth, all animated by Studio Gonzo, an animation studio founded by Gainax animators, which would become Gonzo KK. The game was announced in North America in early 1998. With a heavy push in marketing, including an appearance on the popular official US PlayStation Magazine demo disc, anticipation for this game was high. Originally released in Japan on the Sega Saturn in 1996, audiences outside of Japan would instead get the PlayStation version of this game, which was actually the second version of the game released in Japan, featuring improved video quality and extra content. The game was originally going to get a 1998 release in North America, but technical delays kept pushing the release date further and further until it finally slipped into May 1999. To help promote the game even further, Working Designs would go beyond simply releasing the game discs. The game would be bundled in an affordable collector's package for $10 more than what PlayStation games had normally been priced at the time. The package would include the 2 game discs, a making-of disc, a soundtrack featuring select remastered pieces from Silver Star Complete, and remastered pieces from the original Silver Star that Victor Ireland wanted to include in the game, a leather-bound instruction booklet, and a printout of the game's world map printed on fabric material. And if you pre-ordered the game, you would get a free disc containing a demo of the game that allowed your save progress to be carried over to the full retail version. 1999 was a strong year for role-playing games, but Lunar Silver Star Story Complete would do so well that it would become Working Designs' highest-selling game at that point, and would sell enough units to chart right behind Final Fantasy VIII among the console role-playing games. While North America was getting the newly refined version of Lunar Silver Star Story Complete in May 1999, PlayStation players in Japan would get the complete version of Lunar Eternal Blue that same month. Eternal Blue, like Silver Star, began life on the Sega CD. It was originally intended to be a direct sequel to the Silver Star, taking place a few years after the events of the previous game. Instead, Eternal Blue would take place 1,000 years after the events of the previous game. Kei Shigema was inspired by the image of Sun Wukong from the 17th century novel Journey to the West, trapped within the palm of the giant Buddha. This source of inspiration would lead to the main plot of Eternal Blue, depicting the return of the god of destruction, Zophar. The majority of Silver Star's staff returned for Eternal Blue, improving on nearly everything from the original. More cutscenes, more fully voiced dialogue, and more of the Sega CD's limits being tested. The story was also intended to be more mature when compared to the perceived innocence of the previous game. The score would be composed solely by Noriyuki Iwadare, who intended to create a high degree of originality with the music of this game. Victor Ireland's in-house team would compose an original piece for the North American release of the game, Star Dragon Team, used in the post-game final dungeon. The English Sega CD version would be the only one that used this piece. The cast of Eternal Blue would be double what Silver Star had, featuring voice talents like Hikaru Midorikawa and Chisa Yokoyama as main protagonists Hiro and Lucia respectively. The rest of the cast would be led by Kumiko Nishihara as Ronfar, Aya Hisakawa as Jean, Megumi Hayashibara as Lamina, the descendant of Silver Star's Mia, Shinichiro Ota as Leo, and Imasa Kayumi as Zophar, with Kikuko Inoue returning as an older Luna, and Rokuro Naya as Galleon. Null would also return in Eternal Blue, this time being voiced by Rika Matsumoto. The game's 2 ending themes would both be performed by Chisa Yokoyama, with the vocal piece Eternal Blue Thoughts of Eternity being one of Iwadare's favorite compositions. Eternal Blue would be released in Japan in 1994, followed by a 1995 release in North America. Rhonda Gibson and John Truitt would reprise their roles as Luna and Galleon for the English dub of the game. Jennifer Steigel would actually make her Working Designs acting debut with the Sega CD Eternal Blue as the voice actress for Ruby and Jean. The rest of the English cast of Eternal Blue would include Mark Zempel as Hero, Kelly Weaver as Lucia, Ned Schuft as Ronfar, Kathy Emma as Lamina, Ty Webb as Leo, Blake Dorsey as Lun, Dean Williams as Borgin, Imuna Hauser as Mari, Jonathan Essis as Nal, Katie Stake as Althena, and T. Owen Smith as Zophar. Blake Dorsey and Dean Williams would be cast in the English release of Silver Star Story Complete, with Dorsey as the voice of Lake and Williams as the voice of Might. For the game's North American release, a modifier to the save system was made, requiring players to spend magic experience to save the game. This was done to add more of a challenge to when and where to save in exchange for the ability to save anywhere. But in retrospect, it ended up being an idea that was more annoying than challenging. The pay to save feature would be taken out for the English version of Eternal Blue Complete. Working Designs also patched the game themselves to make the game less difficult in parts. In 1998, Eternal Blue Complete was released for the Sega Saturn. Like Silver Star Story Complete, Eternal Blue Complete had increased graphics, improved video and sound quality, animation once again done by Studio Gonzo, and all the voice acting was retained. But unlike Silver Star Story Complete, Eternal Blue Complete wasn't a total overhaul of the entire story. The story in the original Eternal Blue was mostly kept intact, only reducing the number of different FMVs and expanding on some of the current FMVs, either by combining old ones together or just by establishing what was happening more so in scenes. Some of the game's dungeons were modified to be made simpler, and bosses were either dropped entirely or had their stats lowered to streamline the experience when compared to the original. The game's epilogue had the biggest overhaul. The intention of the epilogue remained the same, finding Lucia after the staff roll. But this time, you have new dungeons and new bosses to deal with the Star Dragon Tower getting a completely different boss than who you had to face in the original. The PlayStation version was released in 1999, while the Saturn version of Eternal Blue Complete has 2 discs. The PlayStation version was spread across 3 discs due to more memory needed for video and audio. The staff roll in this version contained animated scenes instead of stills. The PlayStation version also added exclusive dungeons to the epilogue and improved the image quality of the in-game bromides. The PlayStation version of Eternal Blue Complete was released in North America in December 2000, also retaining the entire voice cast from the English version of the original. Like the North American release of Silver Star Story Complete, Eternal Blue Complete was released as a collector's package containing 5 discs. The 3 game discs, a making a featurette as the 4th disc, a soundtrack as the 5th disc, containing remastered arrangements of select Eternal Blue pieces that could not be used in the game due to memory limitations. The package also contained a replica of Lucia's pendant, a hardbound instruction booklet that also served as a strategy guide for a portion of the game, character standees, and a cloth print of the world map. The English version also features an exclusive fix to a soft lock that can occur during the game's first boss. If the boss is trapped by the body's hero in Gwaine and is unable to kill Lucia, Ruby will then suddenly and effortlessly defeat the boss. This was also an opportunity for the localizers to foreshadow Ruby's fate much later in the story. The English version also adjusted the opening prologue. Normally, at the beginning, there is text that sets up the story for the first time. This was also in the English Sega CD version. However, there were technical difficulties incorporating English text into the Eternal Blue Complete prologue. So to compromise, the text was removed completely, and what was originally written was instead narrated by John Truitt.
Hanging silently in space, the world in the shadow of the blue star was once a lonely, barren place, unfit for habitation. However, Althena took pity on that world and transformed it into a place of beauty and wonder. She called the new world Lunar. Time and circumstance conspired to force Althena to populate Lunar with people from the blue star, and, just as on the world from which they came, life was held in a delicate balance. Through times of peace, war, chaos, and battle, The blue star loomed as the only constant in the new world. Thousands of years passed, burying the origin and purpose of the blue star in the sands of time. Eventually, inhabitants of Lunar forgot why the blue star was there or how it came to be, until a girl awakened that could join the two worlds, or tear them apart forever.
Working Designs struggled to keep up the momentum it had garnered with their releases in the 90s, and after Eternal Blue Complete, they would publish only a handful of titles before shuttering in 2005 due to difficulties securing approval from Sony on releases for the PlayStation 2, including a planned game in Konami's Goemon franchise. Studio Alex would also shutter their doors after an unsuccessful attempt to sue GameArts for royalties over the Saturn remake of the Game Gear Lunar spin-off, Lunar Senposudu Gakuen. GameArts would continue to thrive, not only because of the main Lunar games, but with the Grandia franchise. Victor Ireland would start a new publishing company with former Working Designs members, Gaijinworks. The Lunar franchise would continue, sort of. In 2002, GameArts released a Game Boy Advance retelling of Lunar Silver Star Complete. In 2005, a brand new Lunar was released, Lunar Dragon Song for the Nintendo DS. It was released in 2006 in Europe under its Japanese name, Lunar Genesis, making it the first Lunar game to be released in Europe. The game was praised for its story, but universally panned for its gameplay mechanics. In 2009, GameArts released a PlayStation portable version of Lunar Silver Star Complete, Lunar Silver Star Harmony. This version featured new graphics, new battle features, a brand new prologue, and new art, while retaining the Studio Gonzo cutscenes and the overall story from Silver Star Story Complete. The North American and PAL versions were released in 2010 with a brand new localization and English cast. Jennifer Steigl was the only original cast member to return as the vocalist for the newly localized versions of Tsubasa and Kaze no Nocturne. Eternal Blue or Eternal Blue Complete was never reissued or re-released outside of Japan after 2000, only being reissued as part of the Mega Drive Mini 2 alongside Lunar the Silver Star in 2022 in Japan. Nearly the entire English cast of the original Lunar games have kept a low profile for themselves, except for Ashley Parker Angel, who after his performances as Alex would be one of the founding members of boy band O-Town. The band was formed and featured on the first 3 seasons of the ABC reality series Making the Band. After O-Town disbanded in 2003, Angel would embark on a solo career, leading him to more acting opportunities and even Broadway appearances. His latest appearance on television was on Fox's The Masked Singer in 2023 as the S'more character. In early 2024, Steigl and Galleon voice actor John Truitt were announced as being part of the cast for the upcoming Kickstarter-funded game Godshard Chronicles, with Steigl slated to perform a vocal track for the game, composed by Lunar composer and one of the lead composers of Godshard Chronicles, Noriyuki Iwadare. The collector's packages that set the North American releases of Silver Star Story and Eternal Blue Complete would slowly become a part of gaming culture, with collector's editions of various games being an option for purchasing. Thanks in large part to its dedicated following, the 1999 release of Lunar Silver Star Story Complete became one of the standout hits of North America, preceding North America's start of the next generation of gaming, while in Japan, Eternal Blue Complete would become the definitive way to experience an evolved take on an already successful formula. Whether it's the Sega CD originals, the Saturn versions exclusive to Japan, or the PlayStation versions that made each mainline Lunar experience complete, the Lunar games remained one of the most captivating in the genre, setting itself apart with its storytelling, animation, characters, acting, and fantasy settings. Lunar took on a life of its own and captivated audiences in unique and exciting ways. Final Fantasy VIII, composed by Nobu Uematsu. With every new hardware he worked on, and with every new Final Fantasy he composed, he would continue to evolve his own composition style and raise the bar for role-playing game music. Final Fantasy VII sacrificed audio quality to ensure that the game could load quicker. This time, there was little compromise in the audio. Everything sounded much more realistic than his previous work. In an interview with Polygon in 2017, Uematsu suggested that listening to the music of the Suikoden series inspired him to have a different view on the audio quality of his works in games at that point. For this game, Uematsu wanted to channel the emotions conveyed by the characters and the story, even going so far as to suggesting that the emotions expressed through the music were more important than the skills behind them. For the first time since Final Fantasy V, Uematsu was able to use music to express the idea of the characters and their emotions, something that he felt he couldn't achieve with the soundtracks to 6 and 7. One of the main plots of Final Fantasy VIII is the relationship between Squall and Rinoa. Their relationship inspired the iconic vocal piece, Eyes on Me. Vocal pieces had been used before in video games, so it wasn't the most innovative addition to the soundtrack. However, Eyes on Me ended up becoming the most successful vocal theme in a video game released in the 90s, raising and setting the bar for vocal themes in future games released. Chinese vocalist Fei Wang was chosen to perform this song because her vocals and how she expressed her emotions in song matched what he wanted from Eyes on Me. It wasn't just an insert song to be heard in a specific spot of the game, it was also a plot device during the story segments involving Laguna and Julia. Eyes on Me wasn't the only vocal piece, however. The game immediately begins with a strong orchestra choir overture, Liberi Fatali. The lyrics are performed in Latin, but the signature phrase, Vitos Lusec Vicos Vinosec, is not a real Latin phrase. It is actually an anagram of the word love and the phrase succession of witches. There is another piece in the soundtrack titled Vitos Lusec Vicos Vinosec that plays during Idia's parade. This piece is also notable outside of the game, as it was used during the 2004 Summer Olympics for Alison Bartosik and Anna Kozlova's bronze-winning synchronized swimming performance. Music is even used as a minor side plot in the game. When the protagonist group is preparing for the Garden Festival, Selphie and Irving attempt to form a band with the protagonists, except Squall and Rinoa. You can pair a character with an instrument and the result will be one of three: a performance of Eyes on Me, an Irish jig, or a cacophony of the two possible scenarios. As much of a departure it was for the series, it ended up being one of Uematsu's most evolved soundtracks. With a higher quality sound, more opportunities were presented to give the Final Fantasy series the kind of music it hadn't experienced before, setting the standard for future Final Fantasy titles to follow.
Ape Escape. You better get them before they get you.
PlayStation.
I want to love you. I want to hold you. I want to need you. And love you some more.
Skateboards, bikes, and blades. 3 Extremes got everything from kick flips, grinds, and 720s to vicious punches and jabs.
9, 8, 9. Studios.
What about Cooper?
Okay, that's the first checkpoint.
Now, Shinji Mikami, creator of the Biohazard series, presents all new suspense, all new panic. Dino Crisis. The horror is alive.
Wishing on a dream that seems far off, hoping it will come today. Into the starlit night, foolish dreamers turn their gaze, waiting on a shooting star. But what if that star is not to come? Will their dreams fade to nothing when the horizon darkens most? We all need to believe there is hope. Is an angel watching closely over me? Can there be a guiding light I've yet to see? I know my heart should guide me, but there's a hole within my soul. What will fill this emptiness inside of me? Am I to be satisfied without knowing? I wish then for a chance to see now all I need desperately is my star to
Look at you, hacker. A pathetic creature of meat and bone, panting and sweating as you run through my corridors. How can you challenge a perfect, immortal machine?